Welcome. My name is Jeffrey Nudin, and I'm the Executive Director of the Asian American Writers Workshop. And I'm thrilled to be here with you tonight for Women Warriors, a Solidarity reading. For those of you who are new to the workshop, we are a national nonprofit organization dedicated to amplifying and empowering Asian and Asian diasporic storytelling and artistry. Since our founding in 1991, we have provided a literary art space that operates at the intersections of art, race, and social justice. Tonight's program would not be possible without the friendship and support of Brooklyn Poet Laureate Tina Chang. Thank you, Tina, for inspiring us tonight and for helping make this gathering happen. In the wake of last month's horrific murder of 8 innocent victims in Atlanta, Georgia, we offer this space tonight as one for grieving, healing, and empowering. The intrinsic links between the long history of violence against our community and the systemic plagues of racism and misogyny cannot be ignored. The shadows of white supremacy, empire, and colonialism may tail the history of our people, but our spirit, our artistry, and our resolve remain strong. Our ancestors wouldn't have it any other way. Tonight we honor Soonjung Park, Hyunjung Grant, Sooncha Kim, Zen-Yie, Delana Ashley Yoon, Paul Andre Michaels, Zhaoji Tan, and Dai Yu Feng. Tonight we celebrate our mothers, our daughters, and our sisterhood. And tonight we gather as a collective, determined to turn the just world of our imaginations into a powerful new reality. We have an amazing evening of readings and performances lined up for you tonight, featuring 40, yes, that's 40, incredible artists. Thank you to each and every one of the women who are participating in tonight's program. And thank you all for being here. I hope tonight's program is as much a balm for you as it was for us to produce.
Hello, my name is Tina Chang, and I'm a poet, I'm a teacher, editor, mother, organizer, and collaborator. I'd like to thank the Asian American Writers Workshop for collaborating with me, and specifically Chafreen Udin for helping to organize this incredible collective of Asian American female writers. Our hope today is to first and foremost acknowledge each other's stories, our experiences, to hear each other, to see each other, to grieve alongside each other, to hopefully heal a little bit as a result, and to feel empowered moving forward just in each other's presence. I'd like to offer a couple of resources that have been particularly helpful to me. The first is, of course, the Asian American Writers Workshop. The AAWW provides a sanctuary for Asian American writers. They host live events on Instagram and in person when we are all safe to do so. They offer fellowships for emerging writers and workshops for youth and seniors. And they publish The Margins, a digital magazine, among so many other things that they do. Another organization I'd like to draw your attention to is Kundiman. One of the co-founders, Sarah Gambito, will be reading a poem today. And her other co-founder is Joseph Legaspi. They are a national nonprofit organization dedicated to nurturing generations of writers and readers of Asian American literature. And the final organization I'd like to draw your attention to is Asians for Mental Health, which can be found on Instagram. And I have found it particularly helpful for daily discussions, informations, and pathways to center mental health for Asian and Asian Americans. And of course, I'd like to thank the writers who are participating today. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for offering your gifts. For any of you who are so lucky to hear the readings today, they are breathtaking. It makes me so proud in the midst of so much pain right now to hear their stories, to hear their poems, and I know that you will love it. I thank you for allowing me to be a part of this community. I'll read to you a poem today that is from my collection called Hybrida. And I originally wrote this poem for a young girl named Naomi Alvarez Quile. She attempted to travel 6,500 miles from the highlands of Ecuador to the United States to meet her mother and her father. She was accompanied by human smugglers, and the details are incredibly intricate, but she never made it to the United States alive. Thinking about her life and also her death reminded me so much of the journey of Asian immigrants in this country. How it is the hope and the dream to achieve a rightful place here, where we are accepted within the community, where we belong, where we are happy, where we can thrive. And for some of us, that might be achievable, and for others, they are not. I read this poem in the memory of the victims in Atlanta, Georgia on March 16th. I grieve alongside their families and their loved ones, and I'm thinking of our community every single day. This is called The Shifting Kingdom. Now they're only the cactus and the desert blossoms unfolding their soft garments, and the twilight road along whose crossings dolls are strung with nettles, over whose skulls prayers pass like a procession carrying cups of wreckage. I am the girl in the sewn coat, girl in a caravan. I had not thought enough of arrival, of entering the portal of my mother's dream, of rising from sleep with my cape of leaves and my mouth open to bells and rampage, trumpet and siren, and that song the horizon wails just before dawn. Bodies left behind, and the loss of it forgotten. Now we are shadows, darker in our disappearance. My coat does not quite fit, and the bleeding ram will never bring me peace. Here everyone obeys, and no one knows where to call, and whose belief to softly wade. In the desert sand, the tale my grandmother spoke to me, her voice floats over me, and I sleep and shiver in its sound. What I wished for is not as I understand it to be. I have still not seen a savior, unless that warm wind passing beyond the fences was one. Though there are no exits, no doorways or openings, there is also no way to enter. The roof blows away in the heat as barbed wire cuts through night wind. Here the girls lie down to the sound of bullets. My fear is the unfurling road with headlights searing and no sleep in sight. It is a back that bends the gruel of my ancestors' song, a reminder of kitchen hands like dying coal, and a country that is a splinter of a shelter.
All right, go right ahead.
I am Maxine Kingston, and I'm an American by birthright. So both my parents were so-called illegal aliens, and but maybe they were not so illegal, because in 1869, look at this treaty that was signed by the President of the United States and by the Emperor of China. The United States of America and the Emperor of China cordially recognize the inherent an inalienable right of man to change his home and allegiance, and also the mutual advantage of the free migration and emigration of their citizens and subjects respectively, from the one country to the other, for purposes of curiosity, of trade, or as permanent residence. Imagine that. There was a time when we, human beings, envisioned that we had a right to travel, and we have an inherent and inalienable right to change our homes and allegiance. And they have the idea of free migration, free immigration, and free emigration. I'm going to read to you a poem that is about my travels, and I'm sort of following the trail that my mother had made long ago. Once I was on an airplane beside a village girl in the window seat. At takeoff, I asked her, "Where are you going?" "Wah!" she shouted in surprise and grabbed a hold of my hand. "You speak like me." "Yes, I speak Seyup language." "Are you from the village?" "No, my mama and papa came from Seyup villages. They left for New York. They lived in New York, then California. I was born in California." I felt like a child, younger than this girl. I'm telling about parents as if I still had them. I'm talking in my baby language. "Wah!" she exclaimed, loud as though yelling across fields. "I am going to New York. I am meeting my husband in New York. He's waiting for me in New York. He works in a restaurant. He's rented a home. He sent for me and waits for me." She did not let go of my hand. I held hers tightly as we flew the night sky. She looked in wonder at webs of lights below. "Red, red, green, green," she said. "Red, red, green, green," my mother used to say, meaning, "Oh, how pretty." The lights were white and yellow too, and gold, blue, copper, and above, stars and stars. "Mother, Mama, as you leave the village family you've never seen again," grandfather walked her as far as he could walk, stood weeping in the road until she could not see him any more when she turned around to look. "She's off to that lonely country from where he returned broke." I felt that I was dying. "Mama, girl, you are not traveling alone. I am traveling with you, here, holding your hand. I know that country you're leaving for and shall guide you there. I know your future. I'm your child from the future. Your husband will certainly meet you. Baba will be at the East Broadway station. You will recognize each other, though he be dressed modern Western style. You will have a good life. You will have many children and live a long, long life. You will be lucky. You are lucky. Your husband has work. He's rented an apartment and made you a home. He saves money. He bought your airplane ticket. He will be waiting for you at the airport." She listened to the wise old woman teaching her. But how to instruct anyone the way to make an American life? How to have a happy marriage? For a long time in the dark, dozing, dreaming, thinking, we sat without speaking, without letting go of warm hands. The red, red, green, green appeared again. I told her, "That's Japan. We're over Japan now. We'll be landing soon in Narita." "Wah!" You speak Japanese too. She admires me too much. Inside the horrible confusion of the international airport, how can a mind from the village not fail to how can a mind from the village not fall to crazy pieces? I found a nice American couple making the connecting flight to New York and asked them please to take this Chinese girl to the right gate. She thanked me. She said goodbye. See you again. Joy Kin. She did not look back. Good. Gotta go. Things to do. People to meet. Places to be. I want to say to all the newcomers who are here, who have crossed borders, I want to say welcome to America.
Hi, my name is Hala Alyan, and this is called How to Survive Your Body. 1. Turn it into a house. Meet yourself at the door, say welcome. Say, I'm sorry I haven't vacuumed for a while. The summer was rough, but there are love letters under the floorboards and enough rooms in this body for all of us. 2. Turn it into a bottle. Become addicted to your own heartbeat, and then bless the mother that made it. Bless the rain frizzing your hair. Bless the womb that twice now hasn't gotten it right. Bless what sheds and dies and returns. 3. Make it into a garden. Remember seasons. Remember harvest. Remember that to love the orchid, you must first love the monsoon. It can't always be April, and a thing doesn't have to feel good to be saving your life, like your heart. Beating furiously is just a seedling trying to break soil. Let it panic. It knows what it's doing. It has seen you through gunfire and evacuation ships, through 4 coastlines and 3 broken loves. This heart has walked you through wars. You can forgive it a little shakiness for. Hold your body like an animal more used to kick than love. When your friend says, us daughters of refugees, we've got that fight or flight in our blood, say yes. Say 1948. Say Thawra. Say passport. Say 1990. Say I remember the road from Baghdad to Damascus and we left my father behind. Say I've been memory since. Say I've been running since. Say I learned at the knee of colonizers. Know the word for nostalgia in French before I know it in Arabic. Know how to erase myself out of a textbook. Say a person can't inherit a world on fire and not grow to practice arson on herself. 5. Turn your body into a language and forget it. Turn it into an arrow and take aim. Listen to your mother. You can take panic and birth a daughter from it. You can take a daughter and birth land from her. It's coded in your DNA. You have your uncle's eyes, your grandmother's heart. Hate this body all you want, but it is still the best living artifact of your ancestors. Every heave of your lungs, every sob is a goddamn miracle, you daughter of your baba, of your mama, you daughter of refugees, you refuge. Every breath is a revolution, is a flag put back together from ash, is a way of keeping Palestine alive, and Damascus and Akka, and you say you don't believe in borders, so why are you still cutting yourself up like this? 6. Turn your body into a country and reclaim it. Turn it into God and surrender. Straighten your back, lift your chin, dread the morning and greet it anyway. Do it for your grandmother. Do it for the daughter who may or may not come, who you may or may not name after map or desert flower or Arab night. Say hallelujah. Say hallelujah, and you are museum, monument to everything you have survived. You are resurrected. You are uncle's eyes and Palestine's voice and grandmother's heart, and there is enough history, enough memory, enough rooms in this body for all of us.
Hi, my name is Cathy Choi, and this poem is called Becoming Ghost. and I dedicate it to the women in my family. Becoming Ghost. In Saigon, I wear my Alzai side saddle on my husband's Honda, the atmosphere a slurry of exhaust and humidity. My hair dragged like a black curtain through traffic. Engines riled, multiplying. Already, it's early. Here, Coppola dresses down, shirtless, sometimes less fancy director, more man of the people gone mad. Gray waves zipper along the shore. Coppola says, I want it to smell like the real thing. I want to tell him the real thing is a landscape of work and death. The names of our ancestors slack in our mouths, just the art of loving your family line enough to reproduce it. Thank you.
I'm Brenda Shaughnessy, and this is my poem, Miracles. I spent the whole day crying and writing until they became the same, as when the planet covers the sun with all its might, and still I can see it. Or when one dead body gives its heart to a name on a list, a match, a light, sailing a signal flare behind me for another to find. A scratch on the page is a supernatural act. One twisting fire out of water, blood out of stone. We can read us. We are not alone.
I worked my way through Ma's walk-in closet. Each dress is in its own plastic sleeve. Psychedelic Poochie prints, a pinkish-brown shift dress, matching bluish top, and bell-bottom pants. There's a red bohemian gown. The upper body's a simple bikini-strap tank with a flower-like motif and organza appliques. The lower is a mix-and-match assortment of transparent devorees layered softly like waves. I lay the dress on Ma's bed and continue looking. Yves Saint Laurent shifts, Pierre Cardin dresses, one of which is a cream-colored car wash mini, worth God knows how much. And oh, the Givenchy. It's Ma's go-to little black dress, one she's had forever. It's hard to believe it's not traveling with her to the Caribbean. The first time Dad left, I was 16 and in high school. Ma packed a suitcase with only 3 dresses, and this was one of them. I set it carefully beside the red Poochie and go back for more. Hervé Léger, Dior, Chanel. Oh my God, another Givenchy. This one a gown. Ma's last boyfriend must have invited her to a black tie ball. Deep V-neck, sleeveless, halter-like and with a fitted waist. Silk sheer paneled netting, a floral macrame design elegantly hiding the breasts, and yet drawing the eye straight to it. There's a rear central vent, cut from the same sheer panel netting as the front, embroidered with dots like a bride's veil. Gautier, Fendi, Miu Miu. Then I see it. Tibetan floral brocade pattern, recreated in a thin red lace layered over silk black mini dress. It's a Jeff Jones, one of his earlier 60s styles, which broke him into the industry. He's one of the first major designers to successfully incorporate East Asian patterns into Western women's apparel. It became his signature. Ma's kept it well. There's only a touch of discoloration at the inner neckline. I tried on. The dress fits perfectly. It would be cheesy to wear a Jeff Jones to Jeff Jones party, but it's so unique, so perfect, so rare. I match it with Louboutins to give it a contemporary twist, but next to the dress, the red soles are like a loud, gaudy stepmother. That's how I picture Dad's new wife, though I've never actually met her. When Dad finally left, he left. No calls, no cards, no visits. He got a son, and that's all that mattered. He gave Ma the settlement she wanted, and it was like he clapped the dust from his hands and pronounced, done. Didn't he love me anymore? Had he ever loved me? I felt like the loneliest person in the world. In the mirror, an ordinary Chinese girl stares back at me. She may be my reflection, but it's as if the real me is stuck on the other side of the glass. My energy drains. I sit at the edge of the bed and hold my head in my hands. What the hell am I doing? I can't go to the party, yet I can't stay here alone either. Somewhere out there, Rick is moving on. Why can't I? I've got Zach. It makes no sense. That person in the mirror, she's everything and nothing. I'm here and yet not here. Is this what it feels like to be dead? Maybe I'd be better off that way. Ma has sleeping pills in the bathroom cabinet. It's easy. It wouldn't hurt. All this could stop. Make it stop.
Hi, my name is Emily Jungmin Yoon. I am the poetry editor for The Margins and the author of the poetry collection, A Cruelty Special to Our Species. I'm going to read one poem. This is called The Blades. You cut down on the gopher in a single crisp stroke in the garden. In it also, your mother's prized orange tree, a blue jay your family feeds and has trained. I picture the gopher, no longer struggling in the trap, inside the water pipe for the sprinkler, throbbing over grass and stones. Then you must have slid open the door to the dining room, leaned the shovel on the tree. I heard this story years ago in California. In the time of pandemic, alone together, I read too much news. Trump defends using Chinese virus label, woman assaulted in Manhattan blamed for COVID-19, racism is a virus. I obsess knowing our place as Asians in this country, the exemplar minority with advanced degrees and gadgets, a superior meekness, knowing our desirability was built to reassert Western centrality. That too, a type of technology. To keep us in check, a Texas man took it to himself and stabbed an Asian father and two sons, cutting their faces open. One of the children has a gash pointing to his eye, the damage itself in the shape of a blade, a delta, wanting to breach another opening. Watch the wild turkeys roam the neighborhood, unconcerned, banal, and ugly. Yet you love these animals. When our friend's old cat died, you had cried. He was 18, had a good, adored life. You had mourned so for someone else's animal. So when your mother told me at the dining table about the gopher, I was shocked. but that too with kindness, your shovel, for the slowly dying animal injured beyond saving, for entering the human world in the shape of a pipe, a wet reach to a diorama of the natural world. Embarrassed and ashamed, you looked away. As we sat in that moment, two Koreans in a white world, I wanted to marry you, to protect the person who loves like no other, whose kindness is unlike anyone's I've known. Foolish and naive, yes. Every day someone leans the shovel and knife, real and not, against the gentler thing after striking another that looks like us, for crawling too close out of the technology they built. Yet today, feeling momentarily safe in our room, I can ask what you did to the gopher. You buried the animal, you say, in the same earth it came from. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Adiba Shahid Talukdar, and I'll be reciting my poem, In the Forge, the Beloved of Flame, which is based on some of the lines of the poets Ahmed Faraz and Faiz Ahmed Faiz. Rise, what breathes in you is yours, this chiseled body yours. From your nation's dust, O you of water and clay, rise as dust, as dawn, as prayer. As Socrates and Mansour, hemlock delicate, white as jasmine, scatters as the dandelion which breathless signals spring. A flowering branch upon the Tigris curves with the weight of a man. God's glance, heavy as truth, is witness. All decanters shattered, the wine's red flows into the river. Lovers drown in its dark, rushing waters. There's time still. Speak. Let us raise the beloved, mirror the heavens' revolution, turn ourselves immortal.
Hi, my name is Tina Kane and I'm a poet. And I'm going to read a poem today in solidarity with Asian women all over the country and the world who may be feeling especially targeted or vulnerable or reflecting on all of the histories that we hold. This poem's called Stone of My Experience. At some point, Bonnie and Clyde came into it. I was young, knee-deep in love, seeking to soften my edges. But no matter. The hard truth is that when the world is breaking apart, one must get down with the Buddha of one's innermost self and ask, what is work and why should one do it? Mary advised me to put the small stone of my experience on a personal altar of sorts, so I can pick it up from time to time and remember. Diane said to shove at the thing from all sides and revolutionize, but it takes time to get to the heart of a matter. At a crossroads, I thought I'd like to photograph stones, then throw the photos into the air in the direction of the sun, a gesture towards metaphor. But that now sounds as baseless as Orlando confessed he felt the other day when he spoke of his remorse of men and their colonial ways. In America, we use words like profit, comfort, real estate, as if they mean love, as if something beyond utterance has begun just by saying them. But language is dumb, as any of us. It's a wonder we work at all.
I'm E.J. Ko. I am a poet and translator. I wrote a memoir called The Magical Language of Others. And thank you for being here and letting me read a poem for you. I can't thank enough the writers and artists here together right now. And everyone for just being. This poem is called Beyonce's Single Ladies, an English to English translation. All the big, beautiful women, bondage women, divorced women, bisexual, transgender women, all drug-free, gay, non-religious, Latter-day Saints, social drinker, straight, widowed with kids, women. Look at the blue ceiling. Dance because the ghost is gone. Your husk was brutalized. It's gone too. You've left the bear, the torpedo, the poodle moth. There is someone else now. The man is an almond in a bloom. Don't touch his childhood. 3 years is not like a straw, it's a house. Find liberty somewhere else. You didn't marry the bear, you didn't marry the torpedo, you didn't marry the poodle moth. There was no ring for you. There will be someone else now. Remember the blue light. Remember the man. You can hear him thinking until he forgets who you are. Call him the president of your body, then show him how it must be to be a president without country. Thank you.
Brown Girl Manifesto by Marilyn Chin. Metaphor, metaphor, my pestilential aesthetic. A tsunami powers through my mother's ruins. Delta, delta, moist loins of the Republic, succumb to the low-lying succubus. Do. Flagpole, flagpole, my father's polemics. A bouquet of fuck you bastard flowers. Fist me, embrace me with your phantom limbs. Slay me with your slum lord panegyrics. Flip over so I can see your pastoral mounts, your sword slightly parting from the scabbard. Girl skulls piled like fresh baked loaves. A foul wind scours my mother's cadaver. Ornamento, oriento, techno, impresarios, I am your parlor rug, your chamber bauble. Love me, stone me, I am all yours. Pound, pound, my father's Ezra. Freedom, freedom, flute-touting girls dancing on the roof of the maquilladoras. Be safe, everybody. Please be safe. Thank you.
I'm Sarah Gambito. This poem is called Grace, and it's from my family to yours. You will transcend your ancestors' suffering. You will pick a blue ball. You will throw it to yourself. You will be on the other side to receive. Green leaves grow around your face. Hair stands on your body. You look at old photographs that say, the bread is warm. A child is a blessing. That's what I said, and I meant it. You could say, this is a poem. All of us listening, like the great halves of the roof that caved and carved together, found us before words and tender footing, before wrongdoing and the octaves of blue above us all.
Hello, my name is Gina, Apostol, and I'm a novelist. Thanks so much for having me here. I write about history and revolution, two things that I think are crucial in our times. And I'll be reading from a book called The Revolution According to Raimundo Mata. Editor's preface. I had not read General Mata's journals when I spoke last year to a Morkian psychoanalyst about the possibility of hysterical abreactions occurring on a national scale. This was during a lull at a conference at a floating restaurant on Manila Bay. Or was it a fish market in Kowloon? I can't keep those junkets straight. There was a full moon, and we could see the marble columns of a colonial building nearby, a monstrous wreck that gave the shanty town around it a nasty glamour. The scholar was an unshaved blonde, the kind one often meets at academic conferences. She was expounding on independence movements as macroscopic examples of aggressivity in the Analysand, while she fondled some frangipani and picked through the pectorals of a Peking duck. It struck me, as she manhandled vertebrae and munched on the fronds, or vice versa, that academic blondes are aggressive bores. To compare our revolution, the crux of our history, to some hysterical patient on a hypothetical couch was just icing on her slanderous cake. But what did I have to offer her as evidence of the irreducible reality of our history? I knew no scholar, no text, not even a comic book that spoke of the Philippine War of Independence without disturbing solipsism or deeply divided angst. It's a history that invites neurotics to speak up. It's no great surprise that it ends up a vulgar patient in obscure neo-Freudian journals. When the publisher Trina Trono described to me the Raimundo Mata manuscript, an excessive term perhaps for the mess she held up in her hands, I have to say I was skeptical. She held up an assortment of unpaginated notes and mismatched sheaves packed in a ratty biscuit tin and stuffed in a tattered medical bag, the edges of the papers curled up in permanent rust. Then she thrust into my hands another stack, a neatly typed translation with notes. But even then, I was not persuaded. In my experience, the voice of the revolutionist is clouded by conflicting purposes. He is vulnerable to the cynicism of a world that by the time he is done has sadly changed. Our revolution failed, let's face it. We drove off a Spanish empire that had already given up the ghost. Then the Americans beat us to a pulp. They had guns, we wore slippers. Who are we kidding? Everyone acknowledges we got it worse than Vietnam, and the Battle of Manila Bay was way back in 1898. We lost big time. Why else do we have post-colonial conferences except to invite everyone to pick at our scabs? Typically, the revolutionist memoir emerges when the hero is beyond innocence, when the dream is dead. The gap between the irreducible, the mad flip-flop fever, the trauma that cannot be spoken, and the speech that cradles it, unnaturally chronological with suspicious clarity and keloids of rancor garnished by footnotes, is only natural. After all, as the blonde scholar said, and I quote with disgust, the gap between language and reality is the bane of the human condition, unquote. However, in the histories of our revolution, this is magnified by the speaker's own acceptance of his fall. We're left with the pathos of which he cannot speak, a rotten trick, if you ask me. This is the tragic underlying note of all our histories. And so I felt this familiar, troubling pain below the diaphragm near the liver when I picked up the tin can journals of Raimundo Mata, now conveniently stashed into this fine translated state. My surprise was great as I read on. That the storyteller is, I must admit, flawed, maybe mad, does not diminish my faith in his story. In fact, his madness amplifies its truth. Estrella Espejo, Quezon Institute and Sanatorium, Tacloban, Leyte, December 17, 2004.
My name is Eugenia Leigh, and this poem is for anyone experiencing pain or grief and struggling to believe that there will be a way out. The poem is inspired by a Scientific American article that I try to remember when I find myself in a period of deep depression. And the poem begins with a quote from that article, from the April 2014 issue of the Scientific American. And the quote says, "About 13.8 billion years ago, just 400,000 years or so after the Big Bang, the universe abruptly went dark. Eventually, this fog would lift, but how it did so is a question that has long baffled astronomers." The Scientific American. Reionization. Not long after the Big Bang, God's first holy call and response, the universe went dark. All that hot bliss of brilliance shut inside a tomb, God second-guessing both let there be and light. We know how the power went out. The cosmos cooled, then birthed hydrogen, which swallowed the glow. The name for that switching off of spark, recombination, depression, grief. But we don't yet know how the power returned. One theory imagines the first stars banded together and their tenacious light knifed the dark apart. Reionization, resurrection. It's possible then, if we believe our astronomers and angels, that our abyss is temporary, that a young soprano of stars gathers now on the other side to sing the crucified to life.
My name is Vang, and as a Hmong poet, I stand in solidarity with all of you against these acts of hate and violence that continue to happen and that need to be stopped. Here's the poem I'd like to read. Anthem for Taking Back. Even after what shrivels on pillows are the syllables of a dream, and our braided furies huddle under porch light. After skyline of lashes close over our ocular machines and a lightlessness governs the way we move our arms. Long from now, how every breath turns out a copy of the air before, and all air moves through us as cotton. What we heed after a fluorescence capes the skin of our early moon, would ever be the scourge thumping inside our ears. Ember our wings out of exile, it says. Ember loudly all of our furious tellings. Thank you.
This is Southern Nocturne by Amy Nezuka-Matatil. Azaleas shout, "Me, me, me," when I walk past the statue of the soldier who would have killed or raped me if I walked past someone like him in 1907 when he was first erected in the middle of the square. It's 2000 and... My friend tries to reassure me. Things are different now. The quiet soldier looks me over as I scurry to my sporty red car, the reddest car in town, my students once joked to me. I was so easy to spot along any street. I can lock the door as soon as I get in and turn the ignition. But tonight, when I drive home in this heat, I wish I stopped first to slide my hand against the cool marble just to touch his pant leg. See how it feels under my brown hand, diamonded by a white man, freshly manicured by a white lady. I love this southern town, the nights that I come home to my sleeping boys, a little dog who starts dancing when he hears my car door slam. Last summer I was on an island in Greece, surrounded by olives, wild dumb luck, since they beam a salty texture I've disliked since I was a little girl. Most statues there now crumble and glitter in museums. Sometimes when I hear coyotes scream fresh when they run alongside the highway at night, I tell myself, I can lock the door. I can lock the door. And in Olive Grove, you can hate the fruit and still love its light.
My name is Monica Ferrell, and I'll be reading most of a poem called The Tiger Abandoned at the Hunt's End, which is in 5 sections. The Tiger Abandoned at the Hunt's End. 1. Blind and tiny, I awoke in this world in the dark. My mother's lullabies were the muttering of reeds. Shrouded in palm fronds, helpless breather in a nest of fur, I nursed. The children of men dream of me. I grew, titanic building of meat. My first word was darkness, my second, teeth. 2. What is it simmers through jungle breeze? What cries red through vestibules of cells but inveterate hunger? One moment it's for death, the next love, so these two confuse. There was a home for me once, beyond gullies of water I hardly recall now that I stalk the orchards of farness, invulnerable and orphaned as the night. 4. Often we'll hear them, men, see their flames spluttering on hills. It isn't hard to avoid their clumsy craven traps, birdlime, and what they do to bridges, widening those slats and placing stakes on which they hope we'll impale ourselves by the force of our own fantastic weight. No, it isn't hard at all, but sometimes nonetheless the call of loneliness rang out the sweetest sounding bird in my forest. 5. So it came for me, with a rain of sulfur and sparks, fireworks scattering daylight, floods of sunspots of blood drowning all the friends, my younger selves, down on one leg, down on my side, hammer down, iron, then the woman stiffly lifted from her horse, the man planting his rifle in the ground, proud, the coward. Lying on my back, I widened my eyes till they were as wide as the sky, and in that sky there was whiteness, like the whiteness at the end of the mind. I felt my body wilt like snow. I felt it blow away like clouds. I was all heart and eyes. I couldn't even use my mouth. The ground was swimming in me. Breeze was swimming in me. Memories lifted from my body like flies. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Chang, and I am a poet living in DC, and I'm going to read a new poem, and the title is What is Truth? The woman in the bed next to mine was also a wife, also a suicide, and refused to take off her headscarf. Both of us have been emptied, stomach pumped, hazy, self-hazed in the bleak hours before dawn. She had more to say than I did, more right to her grief, though our charts read the same. Neither of us content, neither white. Without my glasses, the room a yellow blur, her cold dark eyes startling like a reflection caught in passing. Alone with her, far from my life, we were a calm pair, propped up on white sheets, stiffened by daily bleaching, every touch sterilized, unfeeling. Like me, she had taken pills, Vicodin, Percocet, poisoned Anapest, tingling our throats. She had not chosen her own life and so endeavored to leave it. The indifferent husband, the children, pitiless, pulling at her sleeves, her hands, pant legs, and hems, because what body? Her voice hoarsened by the tube stuck down her throat to rid her gut of death. Now half cackle, half croak, she mocked herself. There is no body. I too feel the ache that is all mine. On the bed beside hers, I was without skin, bloodless, boneless, worn down by a weeping that bore no tears. Here at the threshold of death's vault, from which we'd both been shut out, my silence and her voice knocked at the invisible door. Or am I fooling myself to think our stories are the same, our twins suffering on identical twin beds, two griefs, strangers to each other, two women who wake up day after day, done, is a banality. I have a world of friends I call sisters. None of them know the truth, that I was dying in my youth, what one teacher called salad days, then kissed me on the cheek unbidden. If only I told the truth. Don't touch me. Don't serve me on the plate of your sympathy. Oh, it hurt. The process of being saved. The nurses on the graveyard shift did not mourn us, their nonchalance, a critique of our dying and our living. I was not yet 30. I did not have to go home, though I would the next day, because it was easier to hate my life than to have no home, to commune in the shadow of a woman bound to the world as if by law. I loved her voice, the steely surety of each word. I loved her voice for not being mine. I believe that what brought us together was proof there is no law, only the murmurs of other women in other rooms, only us at this late hour in the Western world. I would be lying if I said those rooms are past. Now that I am a mother and no longer want to die, she is next to me, picking out new words for pain. Choose this one, that one, purple blooms that wipe out the winter. Choose the word that swears will survive again. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Monica Yoon. Thank you for opening up this space. I'm going to read a poem that I wrote about immigrants, about Asian American immigrants in particular. It was a poem I wrote in the wake of family separation at the border. I wrote it when I was staying in Texas, about 50 miles from the Mexican border. But I had also just visited Southern California, and I was thinking about the history of Asian American immigration to the US. They brought us here to cut their sugar cane, to build their railroads, to till their fields, to clean their houses, to do their laundry, to raise their children. And then they didn't want us to stay. They wanted us to be the permanent aliens in our own country. And thinking about immigrants, and the generative possibilities of immigrants, I thought about trees. I thought about how a plant can leave, and I thought about the dual meaning of leave, as in get out of here, go home. Leave. Because it is to create an acute angle, an angle shaped like a wedge, because it is to give birth to what you already know to be expendable after it has cleaned, after it has fed you, because you are enriched by even its deterioration, because the join might seem slender like a throat, because the bud might seem tender like a bud, but in this tenderness you do not share. You do not share anything. Because even the join is also a jam, a harbinger of scab, a rust-red portal that shuts down what it depletes, that shuts out the obsolete, because you keep what is inside from seeping out, because you keep what is outside from slipping in, because in the singular and as a noun, you are a form of formal permission, as in, why don't you make like a tree and...
Hey, I'm CPM Chang, author of the novel How Much of These Hills is Gold and a National Book Foundation 5 Under 35 honoree. I've been thinking a lot about our Asian elders in these days, and today I'm going to read to you from an essay I wrote last year for The New Yorker called When Your Inheritance is to Look Away. Only as an adult have I begun to understand the scope of what preceded me. My parents grew up during the Cultural Revolution, a time when events of mythic proportions engulfed an entire nation, and thereby became normalized. Very recently, I learned that my mild-mannered, rule-abiding mother took part in the Tiananmen protests. She noted this casually as we bickered about something insignificant, maybe the way young people these days wear their hair. Young people always latch onto fads, my mom said, and then Tiananmen. She batted away my astonishment. It wasn't a big deal because, just like the awful dyed hair trend of 2017, everyone was doing Tiananmen in 1989. Everyone in that generation experienced mortal danger or starvation or hard manual labor. My uncle has a story, told with equal casualness, about how he quit being a picky eater. The key is to get stranded for 2 days in a jungle with a truck full of other boys hired out to earn money for their families, with no rescue in sight. There are among us in America this very day, buying their groceries and paying their car insurance and scolding their children and walking their dogs, millions of Chinese and Mexican and Colombian and Vietnamese and Korean immigrants and refugees who should be writ as large as any Greek hero. They are survivors of famine and war, desert crossings and night bombings. They choose to live quietly. They minimize their origins and speak mostly of their children. The real heroes, these immigrants believe, of stories that take 2 generations to tell. I count myself lucky to have even a few glimpses of my family mythology. A friend's father still has not told her about how he, one dark night, swam the channel from mainland China to Hong Kong to escape, or how he, alone among his companions, survived that journey. The color of the sky, the chill of the water, the pain or fear or elation her father must have felt in those hours, whether the moon was visible or not, all lost to silence. We can't be silent anymore. If you, as I, have found it hard to fight for yourself, to speak up for yourself, then fight for your parents, for your grandparents, for those immigrants in your family who braved entirely new worlds, who left everything behind, who came here, who were and are American. We are American. And I am so proud of us for speaking out, for being angry, for being furious, for doing something. I'm so proud of us.
Hold sorrow. Imagine a farm, a famine. Your mother promised you'll learn tailoring. Imagine your father pocketing $600. Now here's the boat, its black planks wet with fog. Here is the room holding a bed, no mirror, your wash basin. You have one window wired to face the street. He will keep his pants on, his greasy shirt, his shoes. Imagine the quarter pressed after into your palm. Your street will be named for presidents you never heard of, the city's lights like strings of blood in puddles. Imagine, if you could, you'd carve your father's name on a knife tip. At night, only the train cries. Your door locks from the outside.
Hi y'all, I'm Tarfia Faizullah, and this is How I Became Sagacious by Chen. The day the window grew till it no longer fit the house was the night I decided to leave. I carried in my snake mouth a box full of carnal autobiographies. I went in search of a face without theory. The window went on to sing a throb of deer melody. The shape, the day of my belly sobbed with the outline of a deer. The clouds were a mouth-shaped poison and ready. I saw violence in anything with a face. I wished for a place big enough for grief. And all I got was more grief, plus People magazine. There were some inside things I was going to make outside things just for one person in a godless living room full of passé plants. Now what? So blah and bewildered, my hands have turned out to be no bee, all bumble, unable to tell the difference between the floor and the ground. They feel dirt, but it feels like something they made. Love y'all.
I'm Nathalie Handal, reading the poem Asian American, an aria. We will pull the country through its heart until it sees us, awakes like a rumor of war or peace, unexpected and unheard. We will make them ask, how does a bullet rewrite a body? How does a door turn into death? We will make them see the bruises beneath the bend of our breaths, the waves swelling with the history of drowning faces in street pavements, our parlors. We will open ourselves to show the bodies they've killed, make them listen to our voices tied together, singing, women, warrior, wind.
I'm Jane Wong, and I'm a poet, professor, and restaurant baby. I grew up on the Jersey Shore in a Chinese American takeout restaurant, and I'm also the proud daughter of a USPS essential postal worker. And in my grief and in my rage and in community, I wanted to share a poem that really celebrates our survival. It's called Overgrown. Overgrown. The garden in which we kiss all the beetles silver and stupid. The garden in which the leaves simmer in oxtail broth and chili oil so thick it becomes a type of weather. The garden in which we kiss all slow spit and basil tongue and rosemary brow, and I no longer want to be orderly. The garden in which the marrow of memory melts and hisses in a scallion-scented walk. The garden in which we never left, we're never leaving, in which an imprint in fog was not a shadow shouldered in mid-rib ache. The garden in which I am a pond monstrous, my mouth devouring weed-puckered water, algae caught between the ladders of my teeth. The garden in which we listen so closely, our ears grow ears. The garden in which my grandmother plucks carrots up from their leafy tails, each tuber breaking so easily she laughs down to her wrinkled toes. The garden in which the spiders knit a telephone, whispering the future to each other. The garden in which no one asks, are you sure? Or what did he ever do to deserve? Or what's the context? The garden in which sunflowers wave their heads, heavy with seeds we crack and whistle back and forth. The garden in which owls warm their wings with the heat we left while storytelling sideways on the porch. The garden in which my dream daughter sees her reflection in the frog-footed pond and thinks, I look exactly like my mother, who looks exactly like my mother, and so on and so on. The garden in which desire finds itself on a carousel again, spinning and swelling with string lights like pearl onions. The garden in which we never left home, in which we never left home. The garden in which we must repeat what we want, packed fractals of dahlias. The garden in which I nurse blackberry brambles back to life, for this is how bad it got. The garden in which my mother cradles me close, her jade bracelet clanging against my xylophone ribs, singing this heart I made. The garden in which a cicada sputters like a battery-operated toy under the fat paw of a cat who reminds you of someone. The garden in which I am not made to stand in a corner for years, arms strapped behind my back, legs loosening with sorrow, asking what cruelty makes silence run through me like an eel. The garden in which we lick the stink of a wound. The garden in which ladybugs pour out of a water pitcher, little rubies gulfing aphids. The garden in which I peel fibrous petal after petal and find all my lost vocabularies in an artichoke heart. The garden in which I caress my own face because it is the face of my mother and her mother and her mother and so on and so on. The garden in which our ghosts lie down next to us in the dusk, heavy and full of rice and caramelized onions, lips dripping with stalactites of sugar and salt. The garden in which I wrap all my loves in capes of onion skin. The garden in which we rewrite our histories, ink pouring forth our names glistening a kaleidoscope of knowledge along the gummy mouth of an ancient tortoise. The garden in which I spin the algae in my teeth into a net to carry us to safety. The garden in which cabbage stews and stews into a spackle for a house we build like swiftlets, spit-spun delicious, for this garden is home, and remember we never left home. The garden in which we let grow that which grows taller than us. The garden in which I carry the soft intestines of our survival. The garden in which the spiders telephone again, saying, stay, stay. The garden in which we have whatever we want because we deserve it.
My name is Monique Trung, and I'll read from my second novel, Bitter in the Mouth. It's set in a small town in North Carolina called Boiling Springs. This was the first place where my family and I lived when we came here as refugees from the Vietnam War. It was 1975, and I was 6 years old. The children of Boiling Springs had their own idea of how to welcome me to town. They were never fooled by my new name. They would turn around and silently mouth, or at me, so that our teachers wouldn't hear. Clever monsters, my classmates were. As in the adult realm, the children's behavior toward me was dictated by some accord deep within them that I didn't understand until much later in our lives. The Black girls in my class never called me a name other than Linda. They knew that the other names were meant to insult me, to punch holes into me, to make me fall down. I understood, without really understanding, that Chink and Jap and Gook were intimately connected to how the children saw my body. I knew because of the gestures that accompanied these words. At recess, when fewer teachers were around, my classmates would pull up the outer corners of their eyes for Chink and pull down the corners for Jap. Precise and systematic these children were. There was also a rhyme that they recited that intertwined foreignness with an unclean and sexualized body. Chinese, Japanese, dirty knees, look at these. Emily Dickinson, these monsters were not. Their choreography, albeit communicative, was also pedestrian. They accompanied the second line of their rhyme with fingers pointed at their knees, and with the last line, they used their small hands to pull out 2 tents from their shirts at the loci of their own non-existent breasts. Martha Graham, they were not either. But with what glee would they perform this for me? Bravo, my little children. Who taught you these words? I had to figure it out for myself, because no one in my family ever told me that your parents must have been your teachers. You, their darling little parrots, had become the mouthpieces for all that these men and women couldn't say aloud to me, but were free to say in front of their own children, within the high walls of their own houses. If I hadn't come to Boiling Springs, whom would you have said these words to? You would have had to save up all the Japs and Chinks and Gooks until another unsuspecting stranger came to town, or when you grew up and ventured to metropolitan Raleigh or Charlotte, or even farther afield for a job. When I came to Boiling Springs, the diversity drought was over. What joy I must have given you so early on in your lives. When you think back on your childhood, you must think fondly of me.
Wrap you in my love, it comes from so far away. Wrap you in my love, I offer you this way. Wrap you in my love, for every kind of pain. I see your eyes closed as you dream, as you dream. I feel your spirit grow as you dream, as you dream. When hands meet out to hands, what is the meaning of the meeting? I wrap you in my love, let it cast a shield for your pain. The sacrifice, the sacrifice, the sacrifice that has no name. The sacrifice, the sacrifice, the sacrifice that has no name. I wrap you in my love today. I wrap you in my love always.
I'm Wang Ping. I'm a poet, novelist, scholar, photographer, installation artist, and professor emerita of poetry. A bad day for America. Yesterday was a really bad day for him, and this is what he did, said Sheriff Baker. First, there was only silence. Then the sheriff said, "It's just a very bad day for the boy." Then it's too early to decide if it's racially motivated. Then it's the spas, the massage parlors, the owner exploiting her own people, the shady business that's just too much for a sex addict. So the boy just wanted to eliminate his temptations. But before the killing, there's a gun. Before the gun, there's a belief. Before the belief, there's a word. Before the word, there's a thought. Thoughts can kill just as lethally as the gun. Words disguised in hypocrisy spread more hatred and justify more killings. Bigotry sees no color, class, education, race. It lives in all fields coupled with power. No law can shield us. No finger pointing can save us. Only truth and the willingness to tell at any cost. The punch came so fast, I had no time to duck or block. It landed on my right temple. His eagle ring split my ear. I felt warm liquid down my neck. I heard him scream, "Whore!" I saw his red eyes. I smelled his vodka. The tall, blonde professor couldn't believe his ears when I declined to date him. Who do you think you are? What do you think you are? The pain is worse than the ringed fist, the split ear, the broken knee. I started taking karate lessons. I fell and got up and kicked till I earned a black belt. One chair chanted whenever he passed me in the hallway, "You are not a poet. You are fiction, just fiction." One chair ordered, "You can no longer teach poetry," then called me crazy when I reminded him I was hired as a poet. "If you keep arguing with me, it's my duty to commit you to a mental facility." One chair screamed, "Grow up and stop throwing your tantrums around our place." "Why are you so out of line always?" He sat me down on the bench. The campus was gilded with light, his blue eyes glinting angrily in the sun. "Do you know how many men pulled me aside, pointing at you, said you are not Chinese, definitely not a Chinese woman?" "Is it because I won't date my colleagues?" I asked, laughing. "You don't know your place. Mr. Wu asked me to give you this." He handed me a stone chop. I looked at the word carved at the end of the seal. It was Huang, maverick, crazed, stubborn, ruthless, someone who doesn't act like a woman, someone who says no to tall white men, someone called crazy Asian bitch. What are we in America's eye, heart, and deeds? The first provost pays us the lowest salary, even though we're the most published. The second provost tells us we're the worst teachers, and our silent consent powering the machine, including my own, when my colleagues mocked her accent, scholarship, teaching, not knowing they were preparing the same seal for me, Huang, that sealed my fate, not knowing I was digging my own grave with my own laughter, my own consent. I didn't know my place, refused to accept our lot. Massage parlors, nail salons, maids, nurses, cleaning ladies, maybe elementary teachers, but not professors, not English professors, not teaching poetry, the crown jewel. As students watch and copy, exercising their white rights as they lift their foot and stomp their military boot on my desk to show the Asian bitch and the class who the boss is, calling us maggots, fuckaroos, stupid cows, just because they are having. He punched my face. I was stunned. What happened to my beloved? Always so gentle, patient, helpful, funny. My handsome American professor, mentor, comrade. Then the second punch. I threw my whole being at him, my body half his size. My thought, I would never let him beat me again. He froze, stunned, the same stunned look in old white eyes when I fight back. He looked at the bloody face in the mirror and cried. I stood behind him, cried with him. We loved each other deeply, but we knew something had broken between us. Some innocence, some illusion, some power balance. I knew he would never punch again.
Hi, my name is Victoria Chang, and I'm going to read a poem called Ambition from my book, Obit. Ambition died on August 3rd, 2015, a sudden death. I buried ambition in the forest next to distress. They used to take walks together until ambition pushed distress off the embankment. Now they put a bracelet around my father's ankle. The alarm rings when he gets too close to the door. His ambitious nature makes him walk to the door a lot. When the alarm rings, he gets distressed. He remembers that he wants to find my house. He thinks he can find my house. His fingerprints have long vanished from my house. Some criminals put their fingers on electric coils of a stove to erase their fingerprints, but it only makes them easier to find. They found my father in the middle of the road last month, still like a bulbless lamp, unable to recall its function, confused like the moon. At the zoo, a great bald eagle sits in a small cage because of a missing wing. Its remaining wing is grief. Above the eagle, a bird flying is the eagle's memory, and its prey, the future. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sally Wen Mao, and today I am reading a poem. It's called Obad with Gravel and Gold. I'm sick of speaking for women who've died. Their stories and their disappearances bludgeon me in my sleep. Their language is the skein in my throat that unravels every time a bullhorn blows, every time a road is paved, every time a railroad is constructed. Ballast to blast, built to last, against the orange flames of an open, unwritten sky, the bad ballad of a silenced, hell-bent woman bled its way into my jaws, and I wake up this morning every morning, eating my disquiet. Crack my window open, their breath rushes in. Me, this body, the same weight of disappearance, same weight of fortune. Last night, A woman from another century entered me, and her male phantoms possessed me. All night I was warm, cold and savage with their touch. Heatless factories shorn of silk, muslin, and selvage, machineries like guns, no salve for the woman's cracked hands, no salvaging their rations, their ambitions for survival. There was the child of a famine. There was a girl sold for 3 gilded ounces at the old San Francisco port. They sailed through me, and I turned gold with that touch.
Thank you to Tina Chang and to the AAWW for putting this collective together. I'd like to read a poem from my friend, Dr. Yoon Choi, who was a poet and doctor from an earlier generation. He was a very prolific poet, and he recently passed away. I'm going to read for my fellow immigrants. The poem's name is Immigrant's Dream. We came to this country with new hope, new dream, and new ambition. We came to this country with much bigger hope, dream, and ambition. In May 1968, I came to Seattle with $70 in my pocket. I finished my studies while washing dishes and working in factories every summer. Teaching in the fall of 1972, I found myself the immigrant, enveloped within the great heart of the University of Wisconsin. Later, the enormity of the Pentagon, HUD, and NASA might have further diminished the immigrant. It didn't. It raised his stature to giant dimensions. 2006 welcomed the immigrant to a new journey, the pleasant land of retirement. This is still an open country, a vast country from the Pacific to the Atlantic. This is an open country for you. Please embrace your dream. The sky is the limit. You had a bold dream for a richer, affluent, and prosperous life with great hope and greater courage. You made this new country your hearth and home. Your dreams deserve to be fulfilled in this country of opportunity. The immigrants, they made America great. The immigrants are the U.S., the United States of America. We are America. Our dream, our sweat moves our country, this country forward. This world moves forward. The depression we see today, our children and their children will not witness tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, because we, the immigrants, will move this country forward as in the past. My fellow new citizens, let us do our best. God will help those who help themselves. Let our sons and daughters see our dream. Let our sons and daughters witness the achievement of our dreams. The Lady Liberty offers her hope and guidance. Her torch, her light is the ray of hope, sailing from the darkened sea of night. Welcome home, brothers and sisters. Welcome to our harbor of new hope, new dream, and new ambition. Welcome, fellow immigrants, no longer. Welcome, my fellow citizens. By Yoon Choi. Thank you.
Hello, this is Purvi Shah. I'm a poet and author, most recently of the collection Miracle Marks about gender and racial equity, and also Terrain Tracks, which is about migration and belonging. I am also part of the Poetry and Art Collaborative Circle 4 with Anjali Deshmukh and an anti-violence advocate. I've worked with organizations like Sakhi for South Asian Women and the Women of Color Network, and I particularly want to lift up a couple of organizations I partner with that serve Asian American communities in the Atlanta, Georgia area. The first is the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, and the second is Raksha, a community-based organization that serves the South Asian community there. I also want to lift up Red Canary Song, who works for migrant and labor justice, particularly for Asian sex workers. Thank you to Tina Chang and to the Asian American Writers Workshop for creating this space for us to connect, to express, to fight, and to be together. I want to share with you today a poem that I call a broken ghazal, and it is about sisterhood and loss, and particularly sisterhood in loss. In a womb, a new era, and Kali's elision is memory. Objects in the womb may be closer than they appear, but this appearance itself is the first aspect to loss. You cup your mother's childhood, swathe it as an embryo in your ear, your endowed grace, instant goddess of loss. A new era and Kali's elision is our grandmother seated. Each morning a rebirth from sleep, each evening the birth of a new past, our used breath, now nurtured as loss. In blood of waking, women's dreams wax, their womb of thorns protect hidden buds, ensconce suffering that comes with becoming this gender of loss. And in each wax, a wane of some future self, some future equity, this horizon, that horizon itself, in hindsight, swallows as loss. Do you look back without absence? One day, your own body becomes a visitor to your body. Together we familiar in unequal and shared loss. Some days, Kali's elision is generation. Grown and wanting to grow, you nurture mistakes, you pursue living, murmur haunting, such blue-black making, trust night when she too consumes her own loss. Today, Kali's elision is chasm. Connected and wanting to connect, this chest of regret, burning trauma while rejoicing lineage, always seeking time when time herself is loss. I praise, Purvi, permit not fear to destroy the unseen. Tender abundance and sister, some loss of loss.
I'm Gia Tolentino, and I'm reading part of a piece that I wrote in early 2017 after the Trump administration passed the Muslim ban. In terms of temperament, I've always been what I think of as American, adventurous, convinced of myself, contradictory. But I was born in Canada to parents who were born in the Philippines, and although I was in kindergarten when we moved to Texas, I didn't become a U.S. citizen until 2009. It was my last year of college, and I had applied to the Peace Corps, which requires volunteers to be citizens over the age of 18. Until that point, I'd been a permanent resident like my parents. My green card photo shows me in 3/4 profile, tanned and smiling, black hair behind a headband, 4 years old. From that point on, I had an American upbringing so wholesome and institutional that it borders on archetype. I lived on the outskirts of Houston, riding tiny bicycles with a posse of small blonde children across barely developed pasture studded with cheap model homes. I attended a private school through a succession of scholarships where the mascot was a bald eagle, and we pledged allegiance 3 times every morning to the American flag, the Texas flag, and the Christian flag, which is a real thing. I spent Friday nights in high school with bows in my hair and a megaphone beside me, cheering for our awful football team underneath the flushed southern sky. I won another scholarship to the University of Virginia, where I joined a sorority and did keg stands and sundresses. I waited tables on weekends. I volunteered for the National Park Service. I was brand loyal to Budweiser. I was American through and through. But I'd never cared much about making it official. Like many children of Asian immigrants who grow up in conservative white communities, I was brutally aware of racial discrimination, as well as the fact that I was often given some sort of arbitrary personal pass. I was deeply disturbed by the prosperity gospel patriotism that surrounded me in Texas, the exclusions it implied for all sorts of minorities, including the poor. And so I liked my in-between status, that I didn't have to belong to this country to give to it and to take from it wholeheartedly, seemed like the most American thing in the world. Then Barack Obama was elected president, and I felt like I'd come out from underwater. Like all that lacquered rhetoric about the land of opportunity really meant something. Like someone had unexpectedly reassured me that I belonged. I could feel America's complicated magic working on me, that sense of acceleration and unexpected possibility. I was 20, and I suddenly wanted to be affiliated. I wanted to join the Peace Corps with its hippie name and its old-fashioned logo, a flag that sloped and waved into an abstract peace sign, the stars on the blue turning into doves. I liked the idea of being an official representative of America, someone who immigrated, whose parents had immigrated, who had brown skin and no small amount of double consciousness, and was a part of this country as much as anyone else. So I applied for citizenship. It was expensive, lengthy, and difficult, and I can't imagine that the process is ever much easier for anyone than it was for me, a permanent resident who was employed and educated, had no children to look after, and was comfortable enough with paperwork that I could do my taxes without a hitch. I drove back and forth to DC over and over, getting fingerprinted, fixing clerical errors, taking the written citizenship test. By the time I sat down for my final interview, I had spent hours whiling away time in waiting rooms with families who had spent so much more and put so much more on the table. I had become a little obsessed with the immigrants' relationship to America, how you generally love something more when you've had to work for it, how seeing the holes in a country's grand narrative of inclusion can make a person want to stitch that narrative up. I was sworn in on March 20th, 2009 in a courthouse in Charlottesville, Virginia. I had a terrible hangover and got very emotional. It's at a citizenship ceremony where you see what America really means, more so than any football game or church, any crowded city or suburban lawn. In a citizenship ceremony, you see this country's first and only center, its promise of freedom and opportunity, which it has so often issued with extreme dishonesty, and a group of people who want to accept that promise anyway. A woman named Nathalie with a Russian accent stood up at the end of the ceremony and gave an ad hoc speech about feeling American, how she felt that she had something powerful in common with everyone in the room. I don't often feel patriotic, but in front of Nathalie, I jumped to my feet with everyone else and applauded.
Hi, I'm Barbara Tran. I started developing this video for a collaboration with She Who Has No Masters, an offshoot of Diasporic Vietnamese Artist Network, DVAN. Once I received Tina Chang's invitation, though, I realized that I wasn't done with this project and I really needed to convert the full poem into a video. So I'm sending you this poem in 3 parts with warm wishes from Toronto.
Precedented parroting. 1. It was many years ago that I read this. I could not forget it. Because I could not forget it, I reread it. They rock themselves to comfort themselves. They scream and suffer from insomnia and nightmares. They attack those who try to help. They self-mutilate. At the sanctuary, a war veteran and a cockatoo. The cockatoo was kept in a kitchen drawer, all her life in a drawer, kept there by a, what would you call? The bird is bald. She plucks her feathers. Her skin is reptilian, bleeding. Parrots call one another by distinct sounds. My name means strange, stranger, foreign. The cockatoo shares it. Parrots, traumatized, pace and rock. They mumble to themselves. I return to these stories I've read before. I reread. I pace and rock. I murmur to myself. I no longer has feathers. Two, 1871. 18 Chinese men and boys lynched. They lived on a street not far from here in Los Angeles. 3 weeks ago in Brooklyn, a woman on her own porch. 2nd-degree burns, face, hands, body, acid. She is Asian American. In Texas, a 2-year-old child stabbed. Someone unhinged over what someone else termed the Chinese virus. Bird-brained, mindless mimicry, mere parroting. On Nextdoor, someone offers paper towels, seeks bleach. I offer a list of birds, flora, seek sleep. Three. I am red and orange. In my dream, I have a blue head. I am outside myself and inside my blue head. From inside, I can see a tree, orange, against a fiery red background. It is fall, mine, the trees, the coasts, the earths. In my blue head, I am crashing, which means I was flying.
My name is Bryn Saito, and I wrote a poem this week called Prayer for a Trembling Body. Before I begin, I just want to say I haven't written poetry in months, so I appreciate the Asian American Writers Workshop and Tina Chang for creating an invitation to confront with poetry the rising grief and anger continually emerging over these past 10 days. Sometimes as poets, we write the poems we need. I found myself in this poem calling out to the women warriors and rebels and freedom fighters in my family and community and across communities of struggle in a sort of secular prayer for their vision and wisdom. Invisibility is an unnatural disaster, wrote the now 97-year-old poet and activist Mitsuye Yamada. Invisibility is an unnatural disaster. Prayer for a Trembling Body. Queen of adrenaline, come to me with your clear wings and speak me a language. Queen of the breathless season of shelter, today I am small. I am walking with blossoms through the great Central Valley. I am trying to have a child and raging for a sign. I am pressing my luck against Trump flags, flapping over black trucks, sunrise piercing the Sierras. Dear daughter of unbarracked deserts and trauma, dear queen of cerebrum and spinal cord seas, we survived, says my mother. No grocery store murder, no white power virus. Tell me, why are we only made visible by violence? We are aloe in the long leaves of the childhood garden. We are undammed free waters rivering grief. Queen of the blood-brain barrier burning, daughter of scapegoat expressive depression, it's night in the sweat bed. In one dream, all the swords with their skull handles pierce the snow stag. In another, I float happy and unclothed under gnarled oak and lotus. Dear radical ancestor, I am eating their language. Help me set down my husband's gun and unstitch my eyes. Show me post-memory ghosts in the name of new justice. Bring me sister-mouth refuge in the moon-washed, dog-snarled, irreversible night.
My name is Marilyn Young, and today I'll be reading from my book, Imagine Us to Swarm. I'll be reading a poem in the final pages of this book, which is a part of a series of poems that begin with the same word, suppose. It is my way, I guess, of reimagining past wrongs, past violence, in order to imagine a different kind of future for Asian women and femmes out there. This is one of those poems. Suppose the impact was a bell, a warning instead moving through a hollow factory. The violence of men and the colonial rituals of their past were a lesson. In the pedagogy of grief, the earth was good. And then history, the stalwart chemicals of its wake still seeps in the soil. Would we not reverse that too if we could? The atomic weight of him pressed so deep into my torso that generations after would feel the soreness of ribs. Suppose my grandfather never struck my aunt because her cheek was there, and my father, in his piety to the self-same heaving, did not instead tell her to move out of the way. Because I was born witnessing, and in my queerness still desire the love of these masculine injuries, I listened too closely and was lost. The pattern undulates and recedes. Suppose I became the sound of wind chimes crashing into the ground, startling the other body there that would not move. The ghost of my future visits my past and tells her, "You have to be brave." I could fortify my life this way. My allegiance to the bone, its refusal as instruction, will buoy me when memory is not enough. To feel even now the soft impressions of many thumbs. They are not the violence I remember. There is nothing left to forgive.
I'm Zen-Yie, and I'll be reading a poem by the Korean poet Kim Hae-soon, translated from Korean into English by the poet and translator Choi. The poem comes from the volume Autobiography of Death, which is comprised of a cycle of 49 poems tracing the 49 days that spirit of the dead roams after death before entering the cycle of reincarnation. After You're Gone by Kim Hae-soon. After you're gone, don't go, don't. After you've come, don't. When you depart, they close your eyes, put your hands together and cry, don't go, don't go. But when you say, open the door, they say, don't come, don't come. They glue a paper doll onto a bamboo stick and say, don't come, don't come. They throw your clothes into the fire and say, don't come, don't come. That's why you're footless, wingless. Yet all you do is fly, unable to land. You're visible even when you hide. You know everything, even without a brain. You feel so cold, even without a body. That's why this morning the nightgown hiding under the bed is sobbing quietly to itself. Water collects in your coffin. You've already left the coffin. Your head's imprint on the moon pillow. Your body's imprint on the cloud blanket. So after you've gone, don't go, don't. So after you've come, don't come. Don't.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Sue. I write mainly poetry, occasionally an essay. My 5th book of poems, Peach State, just came out. And to the extent that a book of poems is about anything, it's about Asian American Atlanta from the mid-20th century to now, looked at often through food. And that's one reason I'm recording in the kitchen. I'm going to read a poem from Peach State. It's called Buford Highway, which, as many people know, is a part of Atlanta that's famous for its international food. It's preceded with an epigraph from Langston Hughes and Richard Wright from their poem Red Clay Blues. I miss that red clay, Lord. I need to feel it in my shoes. Says, miss that red clay, Lord. I need to feel it in my shoes. I want to get to Georgia, 'cause I got them red clay blues. Buford Highway. Before it was declared a food destination, it was my family's private destination. Most weekends we gathered there, 3 generations. The stainless pot of chrysanthemum tea would always be replenished, same as iced tea. We savored 1,000 treasures of land and sea. When my grandfather died, I was living up north. When my grandmother died, I was living up north. I resolved that no one else would die going forth. When my parents grew tired of amending red clay, they sold the house they loved and its yard of red clay. While it doesn't take a house to remember those days, it's strange to go back and pull into no driveway. What conjures our home is a 7-lane highway.
Hi, I'm Susan Choi, and I'm reading the beginning of the short story The Legend of Miss Sasagawara by Hisaye Yamamoto. Even in that unlikely place of wind, sand, and heat, it was easy to imagine Miss Sasagawara a decorative ingredient of some ballet. Her daily costume, brief and fitting closely to her trifling waist, generously billowing below, and bringing together arrestingly rich colors like mustard yellow and forest green, appeared to have been cut from a coarse-textured homespun. Her shining hair was so long it wound twice about her head to form a coronet. Her face was delicate and pale, with a fine nose, pouting, bright mouth, and glittering eyes. And her measured walk said, "Look, I'm walking," as though walking were not a common but a rather special thing to be doing. I first saw her so one evening after mess, as she was coming out of the women's latrine going toward her barracks. And after I thought she was out of hearing, I imitated the young men of the block, number 33, and gasped, "Wow, how much does she weigh?" "Oh, haven't you heard?" said my friend Elsie Kubo, knowing very well I had not. "That's Miss Sasagawara." It turned out Elsie knew all about Miss Sasagawara, who, with her father, was new to Block 33. Where had she accumulated all her items? Probably a morsel here and a morsel there, and anyway, I forgot to ask her sources because the picture she painted was so distracting. Miss Sasagawara's father was a Buddhist minister, and the two had gotten permission to come to this Japanese evacuation camp in Arizona from one further north after the death there of Mrs. Sasagawara. They'd come here to join the Reverend Sasagawara's brother's family, who lived in a neighboring block, but there'd been some trouble between them, and just this week the immigrant pair had gotten leave to move over to Block 33. They were occupying one end of the block's lone empty barracks, which had not been chopped up yet into the customary 4 apartments. The other end had been taken over by a young couple, also newcomers to the block, who'd moved in the same day. "And you know what, Kiku?" Elsie continued. "Ooh, that gal is really temperamental. I guess it's because she was a ballet dancer before she got stuck in camp. I hear people like that are temperamental. Anyway, the Sasakis, the new couple at the other end of the barracks, think she's crazy. The day they all moved in, the barracks was really dirty, all covered with dust from the dust storms and everything. So Mr. Sasaki was going to wash the whole barracks down with a hose, and he thought he'd be nice and do the Sasagawara's side first, do them a favor. But you know what? Mr. Sasaki got the hose attached to the faucet outside and started to go in the door. And he said all the Sasagawara's suitcases and things were on top of the army cots, and Miss Sasagawara was trying to clean the place out with a pail of water and a broom. He said, "Here, let me flush the place out with a hose for you. It'll be faster." And she turned right around and screamed at him, "What are you trying to do? Spy on me? Get out of here, or I'll throw this water on you." He said he was so surprised he couldn't move for a minute. And before he knew it, Miss Sasagawara just up and threw the water at him, pail and all. Oh, he said he got out of that place butt fast. Mad woman, he called her. But Elsie had already met Miss Sasagawara too, over at the apartment of the Murakamis, where Miss Sasagawara was borrowing Mrs. Murakami's singer, and Elsie had found her quite amiable. She said she was 39 years old. Imagine, 39. She looks so young, more like 25. But she said she wasn't sorry she never got married because she's had her fun. She said she got to go all over the country a couple of times, dancing ballet. After we emerged from the latrine, Elsie and I, slapping mosquitoes in the warm, gathering dusk, sat on the stoop of her apartment and talked a while, jealously of the scintillating life Miss Sasagawara had led until now, and nostalgically of the few ballets we had seen in the world outside. How far away Los Angeles seemed. Thank you.
My name is Kimiko Hahn, and thank you to organizers Tina Chang, Jeffrey Nudin, and the Asian American Writers Workshop. 30 years ago, on March 10th, around 10 p.m., a bunch of white kids with baseball bats attempted to beat up a couple of Asian American kids in a Yonkers, New York parking lot. A car race ensued. At the same time, my parents were driving back from a performance of Japanese theater in Manhattan. At a stoplight, my father began to turn from the main road to the Sprain Parkway ramp, and the Asian American kids rammed into the passenger side. My mother died instantly. You can see the irony here. An anti-Asian hate crime leads to the death of a Japanese American woman. I've written about this over the decades, especially in The Unbearable Heart, and most recently in Foreign Bodies. The fact of violence and the fear of violence is as much a part of my identity as the most exhilarating celebration of being an Asian American and a woman. To add my voice today, here is a more recent poem. The lines are all lightly edited from a New York Times article about a supposed suicide in Flushing, near my place of work and home. Flushing, Villanelle. As she grew older, she caught and collected the enchanting butterflies, zigzagging by the river, meticulously preserving their fragile iridescence. "I want to go to work," the girl would say to her parents. "I want to pick ginseng." Then she left for 40th Road, a gritty street of commerce in Flushing, where strivers, dawdlers, and passers-by are oblivious to what is transpiring. "I want to go to work," the girl had said to her parents. "I want to pick ginseng." More than once in a massage parlor, a man beat her about the face. An officer, a gun held to her head, forced her to perform oral sex. Once, she had caught and collected the enchanting butterflies, and friends had marveled at her collection book, asking to keep one. She was fond of Heineken, Red Bull, and Colombian rotisserie chicken. "I want to go to work," the girl had said to her parents. "I want to pick ginseng." In the end, Cece, given name Son Yang, fleeing a cop-working vice, leaped from her balcony, hit the pavement, died in the ambulance. As a little girl, she'd caught and collected the enchanting butterflies. Her competitors considered her tireless and territorial. A shop owner said, I hear she was number 1, young, pretty, and great service. She once caught and collected enchanting butterflies zigzagging by the river. I want to pick ginseng, little Sonyan had said. She was a born worker.
Take me home to where we belong. Ain't stars blue to heaven, shot from their body by the heat. Soul is in mourning for my sister, beloved star, gold stars in the constellation of night. It's alright, my sister, we are here together. Do what you need to do to heal, to grieve, to cry, to rage, to live another day. Please remember you're not alone. You are blessed, ancestors watching, angels watching, children watching, say
Thank you again for joining us tonight, and thank you to everyone who helped make this program possible. To learn more about the workshop and our many offerings, you can visit our website at aaww.org, or you can find us on Twitter and Instagram. We are sending you care and fortitude from our homes to yours. Have a good evening, and we'll see you soon.